Thank
I
you.
guess we started recording. So, Ghost, welcome. Good evening, and thank you
Thank
for
you very
joining
much.
us.
Thank you very
We are
much.
very, very, very interested to hear what you have to say about group rides, riding as a group the right way, how to
Yes.
keep everybody safe on two wheels.
Right.
Without further ado, we do know that everyone is more than welcome to drop your questions for the end of the session in the comments sections, as well as raise your hands when the presentation is over, so that we can call on you to ask your questions personally. So please feel free to do that, and we will try to make the questions as short and to the point as possible because of time. So welcome again, Husseini. The ball is in your
Thank you.
court. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aisha. Hello, everyone. I'll still introduce myself. I'm Husseini Misari. We're based in Gombe. Uh, I'm a Najala sometimes. As Flagger has said earlier on, I traveled to a couple of places and I rode with a couple of groups across the world. So I will be sharing a little bit of my experiences. I'm not a professional coach on this, but I'll just give my own brief and what I really understand based on the practicals that I've had along the way. And then we've seen a lot of people in here also that have good experience. So it's going to be very interactive. We have a lot of people that are more experienced than I am. But I believe in the biking community, we all learn every day. So I'm going to be sharing my screen and then take us through some of the ethics of group riding. And then at the end of it, we'll ask question and then we'll also have to share all ideas the way we can so that we can all learn. I don't know if you can see my screen. If it's up, Aisha,
Yes,
maybe
yes,
you can
yes, we can.
confirm.
Yes, we can.
All right.
Yes, we
So
can see it.
thank you very much. So the topic today is group rides, riding as a group the right way. So today I'll be talking about 10 essential tips for the motorcycle group riding. So there are a lot of them, but we're just going to touch based on our time. We're just going to touch 10 essential tips that will help us in trying to understand how a group ride is supposed to go in a safe way. So the first thing that we need to do when we're going on a group ride, the first thing is to conduct a pre-ride meeting. So this is a point where the group have a brief meeting where they discuss the routes where they're going, the destination of where they are going, because the ultimate goal in a group ride is to get there safely. So in trying to get there safely, there are things that need to be discussed during the pre-meeting. And then you need to know where you have to stop for your water, for your fueling, the stretching and all that. So this is the point where you decide on the routes. And it's always advisable that you have a map of where you're going to. So with that map, it's you can have a visual sight of where to stop and then where you're heading to, because at that point some people don't really know, they might not know the destination, but with the map definitely you will have an idea of where to go in case you get lost, because there are a lot of travels in groups that a lot of people get lost, right? So it is always good that everybody knows the destination, where the stops are, just in case you get lost, so that you can also catch up with the team. So that's the first thing that you need to do at the before going on any group ride. So you have to conduct a pre-ride meeting before you do anything else. So during that, the second thing you need to do is to decide on the leader. So the leader, I call them the leader, but most of us actually call them the road captain, which is the RC. So this is the most experienced rider among the group. Always advisable that he leads the group, because at the end of the day, the whole safety and everything lies on his shoulder. Because as a RC, you decide when to overtake, you decide where to stop, you decide when there's any issue, you have the full understanding of the road and how to control your bike, because every other person behind you is actually watching you and going after your own lead. So you need to get a very professional rider that will lead. Sometimes we might get so excited. Basically, I've gone on plenty rides with a lot of people where people just get excited to be the RC because they know the road, but they're not really the professional riders. And then they end up messing up the ride. So it's always advisable that you get the most professional and then who knows the road as the RC, which is the leader. Then we have the second in command, I would say, which we call the tail rider or the sweeper, because the language anyway, in some places they call them the tail riders, in some places they call him the sweeper. The sweeper is also another professional rider that really understands the ethics of riding. He will be the one to be at the tail end of the group, who sees whatever is happening in the group, who also advises the RC if there's any situation or if there's anything. And this the sweeper, it's always the one that comes last, because he has to ensure that everybody in that group is safe and has gotten to the destination. So in case where the group has splitted, he takes the lead and then make sure he takes the other separated group to the first group that has gone and left them. So in some cases, we have groups that maybe you're riding within traffic, and then, some can maneuver, some cannot maneuver, and then the first group go ahead and leave the others. So it is the duty of the sweeper to get the left behind group to also catch up with the first group. So in deciding the leaders, it's always advisable that you go for the most professional to be the RC and then to be the sweeper. So in between, you can have all the other riders, the novice, you can place them where you need to place them in between, but never put the novice as the RC or the sweeper, or maybe less professional riders to be the RCs. Then thirdly, you have to restrict the number of group members. Sometimes we get excited, we're a lot, we have to go at the same time, everybody wants to get there at the same time, but it is always not advisable. It's someone asking a question, sorry.
No, go ahead. I think he mistakenly turned on his mic.
Okay. So the third one I wanted to talk about is restricting the number of group members. It is always advisable that you limit the number to 5 or 6, depending on your number. So if the number is huge, it's large, maybe you have more than 10 bikers or 15 or 20, as the case may be in some of our events, it is always advisable that we split these groups into groups of 5 at maximum 7, because it is easier to control this small group. You can monitor what is happening between the groups, and then it is advisable to also work this group based on the speed and their experiences. So what I mean by speed, there are some people that are not comfortable with speed, and some people are not comfortable with going slowly. So you can have, maybe if there are people that want to go fast, you can have that group of fast riders, and then you split the group into 2. You have the slow ones, and then you have the fast riders. So depending on your number, it is always advisable to not go beyond these numbers for easy control of this group. Because once the group is too much, it's hard to control in traffic, it's hard to control on the road, So it's always advisable that you restrict this number to a limited number where the RC and the sweeper can control easily. So the next thing is to ride prepared. Once you have sorted out the groups, within the groups, you need to have tools. Yesterday, we had do-it-yourself training where you need to have some level of skills where to fix up some of the things. But in this case, it's not just repairs. It has to do with first aid, also or for your safety, and it has to do with the bike maintenance. So in the cases where a biker has a crash or an accident or even a technical issue on the road, someone, at least you should have the basic tools that you can use to fix the bike, or in case of emergencies, maybe in an accident, you should have a first aid kit that will help you to maybe arrest the situation before they get to the hospital. But if it is a minor one, someone professional, it's always advisable for someone that knows how to do the CPR to have the first aid kit. Mostly, most of our rides, I've noticed that the sweeper mostly has these two kits and also the first aid kit with him. In case there's any accident ahead of him, he will be the one to stop and do that. But it's advisable that everybody has this tools. It's always advisable to have a first aid kit, and it's always advisable to have tools. I've traveled a lot of places. In some places in the middle of nowhere, your bike will just develop a fault, and it might just be a simple thing like a fuse or something. You might call the mechanic and he'll tell you, open this place, there's a fuse box there, just check if it's missing. And you don't have the kit. You start looking for where to get the kit. It can be so inconveniencing, and sometimes it's disheartening. So it's always advisable that you have your kit, your first aid kit, and then you also have your toolkit with you wherever you're riding. So some people will say, my bike is small, I can't have these things. There are places you can place these kits just for your own safety. So it's always good to ride prepared before you go on a group ride, so you don't keep people, you know. Sometimes it can be so tiring when you're traveling in a group and then just one bike has a fault and then you spend hours there just waiting. You know, it can be so discouraging and so tiring. Then the fifth one is one of the major thing in group formation and group riding is the riding formation, which is always advisable that you go on a staggered formation. So during this ride, the group will encounter straight section of roads and curvy section. In this situation, motorcycle riding formation is a crucial factor to ensure safety during the road. You know, so in a staggered formation, you have where the RC is ahead. Nobody overtakes the RC because he decides, he dictates the speed and he dictates the route, the road where everybody has to follow. So there's a formation where sometimes we call it numbering. We number 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. You know, everybody knows his position in the formation. But sometimes it's always good if you already know the person ahead of you and then the person behind you, so you can stick to that position because of safety. In some cases, you know, we have riders in group ride, everybody overtaking because I want to show off, or you just feel the next person is not speeding. You try to overtake from the left, from the right. We've seen circumstances like that where people have crashes. But in this formation, when you maintain this formation, you're not expecting anybody to overtake you, either from the left or from the right, because you are maintaining a certain position and you are seeing the person ahead of you maybe at your left side or at your right hand side. So why it is always good to have those spacing, it's for you to take decision, right? It's better when you have good view of what you have ahead of you and you take decision decisively when there's any action, call for action. You can take that decision when you are in a stagger formation. But when you are riding anyhow, you don't know who is overtaking you by the left, who is overtaking you by the right, or you need to go fast or you need to go slow. Within you guys, you will have a lot of incidences, which is never encouraged, you know. So it's always advisable that you have a 1 second gap between you and the person ahead of you. 1 second gap, how do you know if it is a 1 second gap? It's always advisable to look at maybe a stagnant pole, and then when the person ahead of you pass, can you count 1 second before you get to that pole? Or can you count 2 seconds before you get to that pole? And it's always advisable to know your pace or your reaction time to your braking, your reaction time to your throttling and rest, because with that you can know the distance you keep between you and the person ahead of you. Because sometimes I've seen places where you're riding, especially in Nigeria, where you have bumps, speed bumps. You're riding, you get to a speed bump, and when you're climbing, you feel the next person behind you is already also on the speed bump, because his reaction time to the brakes sometimes is very slow. He might just come up and meet you up there, or sometimes when you're braking and then you just see somebody passes you. Everybody has his own reflexes and reaction time. That's why it's always advisable, when we stick to the formation during a group ride, you get to see what is happening ahead of you. You have a good view of where you are riding to, and then you also have good reaction time to actions where you take, if there, in case of any emergency, in case there's a turn or whatever. So having the staggered formation when you are riding, it's very key and critical in group rides. Then passing a vehicle, what that's overtaking. A lot of times we see people, in group, when the RC overtakes, they don't care if the road is clear or not. Everybody just starts overtaking and then start doing like telling the drivers coming ahead to just give way. It's always very wrong. When you're riding in a group, you also have to abide by the rules and regulation of the road. So where there's dotted, or there's a straight line where you can't overtake, that means you can't see ahead of you. You have to maintain that pace till you get to a level where you can overtake safely. And then as an RC or as a leader, before you overtake, you must make sure that when you are overtaking, the guys behind you can also overtake with you safely. So if the road is not clear for at least group of 3 or 4 to pass, there's no point overtaking. It's always advisable you stick behind the cars when the road is clear before you think of overtaking. Because sometimes we have a lot of incidences during overtaking where the RC overtakes and the other people behind it don't really get to see their view. They said once he's gone, we'll also follow. And then they get into the situation where there's an upcoming vehicle and they can't really maneuver within those cars. It ends up as a crash, and then that's not what we want. When you're riding in a group, it's always best to stay safe. It's never about getting there early, but about getting there safely. So overtaking, we have a lot of incidences during overtaking. If you're going on a solo ride, yes, you can just do your own maneuvering. But when you are going as a group, it is always advisable that you look out for the riders behind you before you overtake. And even as a rider in the group, when the road is not clear for overtaking, it is always advisable that you stick. After you overtake, you can catch up with the rest of the team, or the team ahead of you can slow down and wait for you guys. But it is never advisable that everybody overtakes at the same time, especially our Nigerian roads where you have a single lane, people trying to overtake, there are potholes, there are stuff, a lot of safety issues. We always need to watch out before we overtake. It is very critical, especially in group rides. Then number 7, having a plan in case any group member gets separated. In this case, we have a lot of such incidents when we're going on a long trip. We've had situations where we've had maybe some long trip where you're moving, you're still seeing the people behind you, but the group has already separated. There are some others that are slow, or maybe traffic, they get lost, and people don't wait sometimes. So it's always advisable to have a plan of how you mitigate this separation. So being separated in a group ride will occasionally happen. It may occur in heavily traffic with other motorists, or in an urban setting with traffic lights, where the light says stops and then the others have gone on green, and before you get to your spot, it's already on red. So those kind of situations do happen. So in cases where you have that, you need to have a plan of how you get to check for other members. Sometimes the RC can decide to stop the whole team and wait for the others to come. Or the sweeper might try to pass and get to the other group and inform them if they are on high speed also. He can get to the group and see how he can get them to the other group that have left. So in these cases, it's always advisable you have your phones. In some countries, you have people going on a ride with intercom where they communicate in their helmet. In such cases, it's easier to communicate to say, you've left me behind, I can't see you guys, stop, or so. It's easier. But in cases where you have only maybe one person with a Bluetooth device, maybe that's the only time you can call him after you stop. So you always have to have a plan in case the group separates. So you also have to continue on the same route because the route has already been discussed, as we have earlier mentioned before the time. So if you get lost, you continue on the route. It's always advisable you have a navigator. We have Google Map. You can use Google Map to get to your destination. And it's always advisable as a leader also of the group to always check for the people behind you. So if you're riding, you have your mirrors, this is the person ahead of me and this is the person behind me. If I can't see the person behind me, I signal the people ahead of me to let them know that I can't see the person behind me. So in that cases, it's always faster since you can't really communicate through intercom. It's always faster. You flash the light, you stop the person ahead of you. We do that a lot of times where you're riding and then you see, when you're checking through your mirror, you see the next person flashing light and you have to slow down to know what's happening. So it's advisable that you have a plan on how you go as a group. That's why it's always advisable if the group is small. It's easier for you to see who is missing and to know what's happening. But when you're a group of 100, you don't know who is missing, you don't know who is behind you. It can get chaotic at times. Then the next one is be mindful of all riders' skills level. There's a lot of riders, and then everybody has his own level of skills. I might be a very slow rider. I'm very comfortable with my pace. Somebody might be so comfortable with speeding. If we're in a group ride, we always have to consider those people that are novice, are new, maybe it's just a 1 week old rider, a 2 months old novice. We need to know all this, the level of their skills before we go ahead to ride. We don't expect that everybody is at the same riding skill as you are. Or as a leader, you do not expect that everybody can go on 160 as long as you're riding a power bike. I've rode with a group of people like we can't go less than 150. So if I'm not comfortable with that 150, that means the group will go and leave me, right? So in cases of group ride, it is always advisable that we know the skills, and then we go based on the skill of the least among us. If the person can't go beyond 100 kilometer per hour or 80 kilometer per hour, it is advisable that the leader will go at this pace for safety reasons so that we don't have casualties during our group ride. We have some people can go on this pace, but maybe maneuvering in corners, it can be very tricky for them. They can't really do it. So you need to know all these levels before you can lead a group. You just don't lead a group because you're an expert in cornering, you're an expert in maneuvering within traffic and good at speed. You're not the perfect RC as long as you not consider the other riders that you are riding with as a group. So it's always advisable that you look at the level skill of everybody within the group, and then you see how you can plan your ride to suit everybody, so you don't have any reasons to have any casualty. So group ride is supposed to be a safest kind of riding. Aside you being a solo, you try to be safe on your own. But as a group ride, it's always best that it is the safest kind of riding. Leave your destination safely, get to your destination safely. That's the ultimate goal, So it's not about showing off your skill during the group ride. There are a lot of, I call them throttle happy riders, where you're riding, and they see a turn. They have their position in the staggered formation, but because I love to take bends with my knee down and this curve with this pace we're going, I don't think these guys can go. I just overtake everybody, go take that turn and wait for everybody. It is wrong. You don't need to do that. Group ride, it's not time for show off. When you want to do that, you go on a racetrack or you go on a solo ride. But as a group ride, it is always good to maintain that safety kind of ride so that everybody feels comfortable riding alongside you, you know. So always be mindful of all the rider skills level. I think I've touched that a bit. Then number 9 is using the hand signal. So just as I've said earlier, sometimes we can't really communicate because we don't have the intercom. So the best way to communicate is using the hand signal. So in most of our rides, we see the RC giving the hand signals because he is the lead. We see what he does, and then we take the lead from him. So if there are situations, he gives a hand signal, the next person also does the same thing. So he communicates to the guys at the rear. Before you know it, everybody is informed that there's something ahead of us. Maybe there's a turn, or maybe there's a stop, and other stuff. So the hand signal is very important. We have a couple of them. I will share in my next slide, but we have a couple of them that as a rider, or if you get involved in a group ride, it's very important that you know all those hand signals and you also understand what it means so that you can communicate effectively. It's just like a deaf kind of communication. So you get to know what the other rider is communicating to you. So these are some of the motorcycle hand signals that we are having, where we have the left turn. If you notice from all the pictures, you see that most of the signals are done with the left arm. Why? Because the right arm is controlling your throttle and it's also controlling your brakes. It is very risky for you to take it off those two while making signals. We've seen a lot of riders, you know, when they're riding, they get happy, they let go of their steering and they just give you the sign like they're dancing and all that, but it's not safe, you know. So it's always advisable you only use your left hand for all the signal. So there are a couple of them, like the top left, which shows that your arm and your hands extended left palm facing down, it shows that we're going on a left turn. And then when you put your fist bump and then showing up, shows that you're going right. When your arm extended straight down, palm facing back, means you have to stop. So if you're raising your arm extended straight up, palms facing up and swinging it up and down, says speed up. So for you to slow down is the opposite of the speed up. Then follow me, extended arm straight up from the shoulder palm straight. So that shows you need to follow me. So in case maybe one is overtaken and then he sees the road is clear, then he gives this arm signal. Once you see this arm signal, then you can follow him. That means the road is clear for you to see. For those that are at the rear that can't really see what's happening ahead, once they see this signal, they already know. Then the signal, your arm extended upward 45 degrees, palm forward, pointing with the index finger, swing in arc from back to front, means you take the lead. That's indicating for the next guy that it's riding behind the RC to also take the lead. So if you are riding only two of you, maybe you can decide to say the other person take the lead. Maybe you need to stop or something, or you want him to take the lead. So there are other signals also where you see the left leg or the right leg pointing at something. That means there's a hazard on the road. The left arm is showing the hazard, and then the right leg is also showing where the hazard, but not your right hand. You have the single file. If the finger is up just one, that means everybody should be in single file. If you are riding in a staggered formation, and then the RC goes this way, that means everybody needs to be in a single file. Maybe the road condition does not allow you to go in twos, maybe, or in threes, then you have to go in a single file. Maybe you need to overtake, or you need to go in a narrow way, you go in a single file. Then we have the double file where you do the peace sign. I think it's the peace sign or two. That means double formation. You can go back to your staggered formation. Then when you want to go for the comfort stop, the forearm extended, fist clenched with the shot up and down motion. That means comfort stop. You know, some people, you just see them stop and when they're pressed, you know. So, but when the RC does this or you do that, they get to understand that this is what we need. Then refreshment stop, you know, They do it just like your filling bottle to your helmet, you know, that's how you do it. And then everybody knows that is a refreshment stop. Turn signal, open and close the arm, that's the turn signal, you know, and it goes like that. Foil, you point at the tank. So these are some of the hand signals that every rider needs to understand, needs to know, especially when you involve yourself in group rides, so that everybody knows what you are indicating, because sometimes it's hard to communicate verbally. So the only way is to do the hand signals, right? And so when everybody understands the hand signal, it is easy to communicate, let you know how to ride safely. Then the 10 is the group riding etiquette. As mentioned, the skill level of each rider needs to be considered within the group, and each rider should feel comfortable with the speed that the group will ride during the travel. Some riders will want to ride faster than the others are comfortable with. If that is the case, consider splitting into different speed groups to keep everyone comfortable and safe. You know, just as I've earlier stated, it is good that we know this etiquette so that nobody feel left behind. You know, you feel comfortable riding with the group, because sometimes if I ride with the fast group and then I understand that this is not my level, next time they invite me for a group ride, I wouldn't want to go there because it's all about speed and nobody is considering me. I wouldn't want to do that. Or if I ride with a slow group and then, you know, nobody is considering me as a novice or whatever, it still depends on how I feel them, you know. So, but it's always advisable that we consider everybody. Then feeling pressured and guilt by not wanting to ride at a speed faster than you're comfortable with, it's a heavy burden to carry. We've already stated that. So sometimes loud exhaust is a great way to keep people aware of your presence in traffic. But sometimes it can be deafening to a lot of riders with you. In cases where sometimes we do have riders that just want to rave, you know, when you're having a group ride and you know that some people might not want to hear that noise. I'm not saying that loud pipes are bad. They are very good, especially in some of the kind of locations we ride our bikes where people don't really check the road safety. You know, they just climb the road or stuff. Loud pipes, they do save our lives sometimes. So, but when you are riding in a group, it is always advisable not to deafen other riders with your loud pipe. You can ride it, but don't over rave. Like, you know, I have some people when you're riding, they come beside you, and that's the time to rave. Beep, 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 beep in your ears. And you know, sometimes it just gets so crunchy in your ears. So, as some good group etiquettes, don't do that. It is rude sometimes, you know. So, and then motorcycle doesn't only contain two-wheel motorcycles. Sometimes we have trikes riding with us. Sometimes we have the sidecars. You know, in such cases, we don't always advise that they sit ahead. You know, mostly we put them at the rear so that they have enough space to also ride, because they occupied almost two-thirds or one-third of the road, you know, alone. So it's always advisable that they ride alone. They don't have somebody by the side, so they don't push him to the other lane. So those are some of the things that I have picked out. There are a lot of things when it comes to safe riding in a group that, you know, it's still open for us to discuss. You know, this is not just a one-sided professional talking about this thing. It's a group thing. Everybody is out here to learn. We learn from each other. It's time for us to share, you know, some of our questions, if we can answer on some of those experiences that we have had, that we can also share among us. So Aisha, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much,
Can start
Husseini.
sharing my
As it
screen.
stands, we have about 20 minutes to go for questions. Please feel free to raise your hands if you have any questions or experiences you would like to share with us about group rides and how to do it safely while carrying everybody along. From the chart section, I think maybe your presentation was a bit too detailed. I don't really see much questions. I just see people giving their insights or encouragements as to the presentation. But someone did ask if the hand signals, the presentation shared on the hand signals, if that is the conventional hand signals used all around the world, or there are different set of hand signals. I know that some of the signals might differ depending on where you ride. So what do you have to say about that? Do we have different set of hand signals for different
Yeah.
sides or different?
Yes, so basically this is a communication skills, just as I've said. It is easier to communicate with the arm. So this is like the conventional hand signals that most riders adopt across the world. But there are some places where you see I went to Benin Republic, and I saw when they're trying to overtake or when they're trying to turn left, they don't use their hands to indicate. They use their legs. They just I wish I could show it. They indicate with their left leg or their right
They
leg that
kick
they are
with
going.
their legs and
Yes,
okay.
they indicate
Okay.
with their legs that they are going that way. As earlier I also said, there are people that we use two hands. They will like they're going right. They just be indicating right or left, like they're dancing. So for us to have maybe an understanding, it's within the group. If you can have some kind of communication skills that you want to adopt, there are people I've also reading with some Harley Davidson guys somewhere abroad that they don't really use hand signals. They just use the trafficators. Once they trafficate right, it's right. Once they trafficate left, it's red. If they want to stop, they just stop, and you see the brake light. You follow the brake light, the lights. You don't use their hands. Sometimes riding a cruiser and you're taking your hands off, you fall off. So
Nice, nice.
it's a
Okay, so we
way.
have someone raising up their hands.
Yes.
Husseini, sorry to cut you short there. We have El Boogie. El Boogie, if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask your question or share an experience with us.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the presentation, Husseini, so far. You mentioned, you talked about exhaust sound, and I wanted to make reference to something that's happened with me or to me. I ride a Yamaha FGR 1300, and it has an Akrapovic exhaust, two exhausts. It's not loud. It has its rich sound, deep. It's just loud enough. If you drove into a neighborhood early in the morning, it wouldn't be disturbing. However, it's something that you'd enjoy the sound of. So it's a very nice sound. I've gotten compliments from it. However, a few times now I've ridden in a group, and I have one rider per se, just this guy, and he's always telling me, your exhaust is too quiet. That is to say, when I overtake him, when there is a need to, and I overtake him, he does not hear me go by. And then I wonder, as a good rider, is it my responsibility that he should be aware? Now, I'm not overtaking him right beside him, like very close. This is just maybe there's a few, there's enough space between us. However, I overtake him. That happens sometimes. If you're not paying attention to your environment, you might be startled when someone overtakes you, and it happens.
Right.
However, is it my responsibility that this rider should be aware I am overtaking him in a group ride? This is, sometimes it's difficult to keep that the line. If you're going over 500 kilometers, for instance, sometimes you lose numbers and you just, you're overtaking each other. It happens. So my question really is it my responsibility to make this rider aware I'm overtaking him in a wide road where I'm going, on my own lane? Thank you.
Okay. Please let's make it really quick and sharp. We have a few questions to go.
Okay, Aisha. Thank you. So, Abugi, thank you very much for your question. So, first of all, let me also explain what I mean by the loud exhaust. The loud exhausts are good. Sometimes it saves our lives, and it also notifies the people that you are coming. So sometimes if you have a loud pipe, you see people clearing the road before you even get there. But it is not a bad thing to have a quiet exhaust. What we're talking about in a group ride, it is not advisable that you overtake the person ahead of you if you have formed a formation. So he is not expecting you to overtake, that's one. But in cases where you need to overtake, there are so many ways you need to overtake. You signal, you horn before you overtake. So if your bike is not loud enough, I guess your horn can also be loud enough. right? So once you want to overtake, you hunt to the person, you indicate that you are overtaking the person if need be, then before you can proceed and overtake him. The sound of your exhaust does not matter. I've ridden in a group of a lot of guys with GS. GS doesn't really have that loud sound, right? Aisha,
Oh,
you're
you
shaking
had
your
to
head.
go
It
there.
doesn't have
You had
that
to go
loud sound, and they go in group and they go safely. You know, it doesn't mean that because I have a quiet exhaust, I cannot maneuver or whatever. You can still do that, but there are still ways to do that. You horn before you overtake. That's my own advice. If that answers your question, just to be brief.
Okay, thank you. We also have a question here that says, should speeds be predetermined, i.e. maximum or minimum speeds prior to the commencement of a ride? And how do you ensure compliance? That's one. Second question from the same person is, where on the line do you place the least experienced rider in your group? That's a very good question.
Okay.
So should speed be predetermined before you start the ride?
Yes, it is always advisable that speed is predetermined, because it is at that point that people that already know their capability of speed can raise a concern. If, for example, before we start the ride and I say, today we're going on a 150, and I know that I can't go on 150, that's the point I said, I can't go on 150, I can only go on 100 maximum. And then we decide, okay, we can't go on 150, let's go on 100 today. Or the distance is quite far that we need to go on 120 average speed, you know. This can be determined before you go on the ride, because sometimes, just as I've earlier mentioned, there are throttle happy guys that you might put ahead of you, and then before you know it, boom, as soon as the ride starts, it is your speed that determines your position, not even the position that you guys have agreed, you know. So it's always advisable that's why we said put the most experienced person ahead. He can decide on the speed level, you know. So once it's going on maybe 100 kilometers per hour, everybody stays at that limit. So it's always advisable that you have that discussion. Then the second question.
Second question is, where on the line do you place the least experienced person on the group?
So in a group of 5, it is always advisable the least experienced be at the 3rd position. That's behind the RC. From the RC, then there's another more professional guy, then the novice, before you put another professional guy, then the sweeper.
Okay.
So it's always advisable you put the novice in the middle. So they watch from experience, then the other one behind him, they guide him. Yes.
Okay, we have another question here from Abiola. Abiola is raising his hand. Please, could you unmute yourself and ask your question briefly? Thank you.
Well, thank you for this lecture that you've given to us. Just a couple of things. The first one is, the question is based on whether there is a kind of a formal training for RCs being organized by BIN for clubs generally, because I asked this question because I'm reading with a couple of clubs, and on both occasions, it was like as if we were on a racetrack, and I didn't really enjoy the ride at all. We started off, and before you know it, the RC himself, you can't even see him for dust. He had already disappeared. And on those 2 occasions, I just did a U-turn and went back home because I wasn't prepared to start doing a racing all over Lagos and so on. So I was wondering that in the first instance, nobody maintains any information from the start. Even after we had a talk, and nobody maintains formation. It's always like as if people want to have a race. So I think, I don't know if BIN can actually organize.
Okay, we'll have them look into that and be able to get back to the entire house on whether it is possible to get training for an RC. Did you have a question you would like to ask our moderator?
Mine is just a contribution to that. That perhaps look into that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We have someone else raising their hands. Thank you very much for that contribution, Abiola. We really appreciate it. Okay, I think we kind of lost the other guy. Is there anyone who would like to share a riding experience? I believe we have about 10 minutes to go. Anyone who'd like to share a riding experience that we would all benefit from? I see quite a few experienced hands in the building. While we're waiting for that, I do have a question actually that I asked on the
Aisha,
chat
we have
group.
2 hands up.
Oh, we do? I didn't, it's not showing up on my
Yes,
screen. I
Tiffany
saw,
and Paul.
oh, wow. Now I'm seeing a whole lot of hands up. Okay, we have Premium MC. Premium, can you go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question briefly? Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Good evening. Hi, Fly Girl, how are you doing?
Good evening, good evening.
All right, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on this wonderful, laudable platform. I appreciate the speaker. I've learned a lot of things tonight. All right, so we cannot overemphasize the importance of the RC on every ride. I think it's something that we have all seemed to overlook, you know, which is essentially one of the most important parts of every ride. I have come to believe that the safety of the entirety of the group mainly depends on the discipline of the RC. I have on occasion had to do solo rides because of the fact that the RC on that ride didn't seem to see the importance of grouping and doing some other things on the group. And for me, it's important to take the right decisions to keep yourself safe. I would like to ask a question. In the situation or in an instance where the RC is not seeming to do the right thing, what do you do as as an individual on that ride?
All right, Hussaini, over to you. Thank you very much, Premium. What do you do when you have an RC who is probably a bit of a lead hand? If you can answer that real quick, we have quite a few questions holding out.
So sorry,
Okay, we lost you for a bit there. Can you hear me, Hussaini?
So I do, when the RC is what?
Okay, can you hear me?
Can you
okay,
repeat the question?
The question was,
yes,
what
clearly.
do you do when you're on a ride and your RC becomes actually the problem on the ride? He's either too fast or too reckless. What do you do when you're on a group ride with an RC who's a bit of a lead hand?
Okay, so I will answer in my own way. I think the ride is supposed to be your safety. And when you notice that the person you have entrusted your safety into his hands is reckless, it is always advisable to stop at that point, discuss with the person, tell him that you are not comfortable with the riding. In case he has gone, you can now decide on having a new RC, and then that person takes the lead. But then you forget about that other person if he has gone. But if he is there, you can also take the decision to say, okay, we don't think you are good as the RC. You can go back to be the sweeper or you stay in between. Then somebody else who is also a professional can be the RC. The truth is, being an RC, you have to be a very patient person. It's very, very hard for you to have an RC that is impatient, because when you have an impatient RC, definitely the whole ride is not going to go. It's just going to go chaotic, because sometimes we've seen instances where you're traveling and the RC is the one like, let's go rushing. You just keep firing and he forgets about.
So in other words, if your RC misbehaves, just get another RC, regroup and pick another RC. Lovely. Okay, so we have another question from Ifeanyi, if you could please unmute yourself and ask your question briefly. We have just about, I believe, about 6 minutes to go, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Nice presentation. Mine is more of a contribution, sort of like a contribution. I really like when Hussaini talked about the pre-ride talk, and I think that everything sort of stems from that, this is in emphasis, sort of like what we've been talking about with the RC and kind of like groups. Where I ride, we have quite a huge number of people, and the ride tends to be a little bit fast-paced, I would say that. But, at the beginning of the ride, we always say, okay, we are going to have 5 stops. and then we sort of enumerate where the 5 stops are. You know, we stop here, and sort of explain, is it just a gas stop or a stop for food as well and all of it. So if you get lost, you know where to meet up. And then you also have encourage having different groups, because even though it's a fast-paced ride, not everyone is going to be able to ride at that fast pace. And, you know, you really don't want to, I mean, we've had incidences where people with a certain kind of skill level try to keep up, and because that always brings us. So, you know, we always emphasize on there are different groups, you know, there are different paces. Just ride in the pace that you feel most comfortable with. And I mean, sometimes
Ride your ride.
Yes.
Your ride.
To actually tell people if you've been riding for a while, you know when people are making rookie mistakes, and you can say, hey, you know, it will be nice for you, you know, to just stay with this group, you know, and ride a little bit more until, you know, you get to that skill level. So I think that just these 2 things, you know, it's pretty helpful, you know, having those stops. I mean, because if you know where the stops are, then the fear that you're going to get lost is not too bad. And you get, well, I know where we're going to stop. I can easily catch up. And we always wait at each stop for everybody, you know, to catch up. So that might help.
All right. Thank you very much, Ifeanyi. We have Prescott raising his hand. Dr. Prescott, if you can unmute yourself, ask a question or share an experience quite briefly. We have limited time. We're going to cap it at 2 more people.
Justice to this topic, because I've written with your group before. Now, I want to comment on the importance of pre-ride briefing that we mentioned one day again, and I want to buttress with 2 incidents that occurred on a couple of rides I was on. One, the RC was left behind by the group because the group felt the group had an infighting before the trip took place. So left their RC 200 kilometers into the trip, and then something happened further down. That's one. Then the second one, I joined a group that had taken off from another point. And as we went on, an incident took place. Simply because we had people with different levels of experience and skill, but the assumption was that everybody was at the same level of experience and skill. So an incident took place which could have been avoided. So that's kind of highlights the need for the RC to be very conversant with all the riders in the group, and then for the group to also trust the RC to be able to get them to where they're going safely and minimize any acrimony within the members of the group before taking off on the trip. That's my contribution.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Prescott. Unfortunately, we can only take 1 more question because we have about 1 minute left before we have to give closing remarks. I see Paul, right? Paul, if you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, good evening to all. Is a question or more an input because when I started riding here in Nigeria with a group, I had the surprise because this was not the way I used to ride in group, okay? On the first trips that we made, I just discovered that my group, the group that I joined, when you are doing a ride with several members, they were splitting the big group in small groups based on the experience, based on the type of the bike that we are riding. So like this, I believe that we'll not have questions because someone left behind, because we are riding almost all on the same machine capacity. There will not be issue because for instance, even if the RC is very careful, I cannot imagine 10 people passing cars at the same time. It's impossible that people are not going to be left behind. And I heard someone tell that if you cannot pass 1 or 2 bikes, then you need to wait until the cars are going to let you pass. It's impossible to do this in the big trip. So for me, because we were not used to ride in Europe, is a highway, so it's very easy. Here is not quite the same. So riding in small groups took us this problem. Because for me, and I have some experience, if I'm riding behind of someone that doesn't have any experience, is not bad only for him, it's bad also for me, because I don't know how he's going to act if something comes in front of him. I got some people in front of me that was first time riding with them. And after a while, I just need to pass them because it was getting hard for me. They were just braking when they did not. They were just escaping from some potholes without any notice. So for me, it was even hard for a big trip to be behind. For me, I don't know if all the groups in Nigeria rides like this, but for me, it was a surprise for me when we are riding in big number of members to split groups in small ones.
Okay.
So for me, a good experience riding here. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your opinion. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And keep riding safe. Okay. We have Lanre. Lanre, please, if it's a question, go ahead and ask. But if you're sharing an experience, I'll have to ask you to pass. We just want to take one more question before we close out for the evening, please.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. That was a very good presentation. Yeah. My question is this: how true is this that the sweeper that we have in a group ride should probably be using the biggest engine capacity, so that he could be able to perform his role, like head counts kind of a thing, when you're going on a very long ride? Then probably because if any bike has a fault, he should be able to tow it, at least with his leg, to a safe place. How true is this? That's my question.
Okay, so Hussaini, the question is, do you agree with the point that the sweeper should have the biggest capacity bike to enable him perform his duties better?
Okay, so I wouldn't say the biggest capacity of bikes, right? What I would say is the most experience. You might have somebody with the biggest capacity of bike, and then he doesn't even have an experience of how to push a bike or how to catch up with the other team members or the rest, So sometimes we mistake this capacity of bikes to mean the level of performance. You see somebody with a very small bike, 400cc, and then riding with people with maybe a GS, a 1250cc, and then he would perform exceptionally well as a sweeper, because when it's time to catch up, he can catch up with the guys ahead and tell them if there's any situation. And he can also use his 400cc capacity to push a 1250cc to a safe zone if there's any need. So I don't think it's about having the biggest bike to be at the back, but having the most experienced person to be at the rear. Like yes.
So the most experienced person at the rear is what makes it count. Thank you very much. Oracle, go ahead and ask your question, please. If it's a question, go ahead. Oracle, okay, we've lost him there. Sonia, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much for this lecture, very insightful. I have a question. When a rider's bike is in trouble, when the bike is faulty and we're going on a long trip, what's the next best thing to do? Say it's getting late. Do you appoint people to stay behind with this said person, or everybody stops? Because, I've had experiences where even in a formed group, a formation, when you see a fellow rider packed, people just zoom past, maybe just slow down a bit and just ride past. So what's the best thing to do in this situation?
Okay, thank you. So Hussaini, did you get that?
Yes, I did.
What do you do when one of your riders is down, has a bike issue, and you're on a long trip? Do you take the decision to leave the person behind with one or two people, or does everybody wait with that person?
Okay, so based on my experience, I'm going to say based on the experience that we had, in some situations where you have it's late, and you have people that sometimes you see people riding with dark visors, some people can't really see at night. You don't advise everybody to stay, because you're adding more risk to the group ride. So what you do is, when you have an experienced sweeper, you let the sweeper stay with the person. Maybe if it means trucking the bike, or if it means getting a mechanic to fix the bike, at least the sweeper is an experienced person. After that bike is fixed, he can now RC the guy or RC the lady to the destination, since he knows the destination. So in such situation, if it is getting late, you let everybody go and leave the sweeper with the person. But if it is very early and you feel it's a happy ride that you just want to have fun, you can wait, do your thing, and never leave a biker behind and go. Right.
Thank you very much. Okay, our last question is from Vincent Arnold. I think that's Big Arnold. Big Arnold, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Oh, wow. Big Arnold, I think we have a problem with your connection there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very
well. Okay. Go ahead with your question, please, briefly.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Good presentation today. My question is, what do you do? Already, she had asked the question, but I would actually want the moderator to talk on the never leave a brother behind on group rides. He has explained it, but I can see a lot of questions there, and I've also asked it because I have a lot of experience on this never leave a brother behind. That's the reason why I don't even like group rides. So my question is,
I think,
what do you do when there's a breakdown?
Okay, thank you, Big Arnold. I think it's still in line with Sonia's. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think I kind of have the idea of what you're asking. It's still in the same lines of what Sonia asked, to expand a bit more on the never leave a brother behind. Why, in that case, even if you have a breakdown, do you have to leave a brother behind? But I believe the moderator has expanded on that the RC, who is the second most experienced rider, stays with the breakdown bike, or the person whose bike has broken down, while the group proceeds, if at all that trip has gotten late. But if it is still early in the trip and everybody feels gingered enough to wait and it's a quick repair, we can go ahead and do that and take everybody home with us to the finish line. Am I correct, Husseini?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. I'd like to thank our presentator today, Hussein. Thank you very much, AKA Ghost, for taking out the time to give us a beautiful, very exciting and enlightening presentation. To everyone who asked a question, thank you very much for sharing your experiences and everything with us. We appreciate it. There will be another session, same time tomorrow. Please make sure to make it a date with us. Biker Safety Initiative is for all of us. It's about us, for us, and it is brought to you by Bikers in Nigeria, also SCAN, and Biker Safety Initiative. Let's please make it a date tomorrow, and you'll see on your screen, tomorrow we will be talking about, let's see, what's the topic for tomorrow? Tomorrow we will be talking about solo rides, before, during, and after the ride. 7 p.m. is the time. Zoom is the place. Make it a date with us. Thank you, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you, Husseini.